we're going to start recording. If anybody has any problems with that, I guess jump off now. So, yeah, we're going to get started. Well, thanks, everyone, for joining us. This is I think we missed a month or two with these, so I'm excited to get back to the flow of these things. Just wanted to kind of say thank you to everybody who's been contributing to the projects lately. It's been awesome just having like Felipe jump in and start to work on things. Anyway, I'm a terrible opener. So what we're going to be talking about today is ROPM. And I want to give a little background on why we wanted it to exist and kind of the path to its existence. So I've been a Node.js and a web developer for a while now. And when NPM showed up, Node.js just like got super popular. The package manager system for Node, you got NuGet for C#. You got, I don't know, gems or something for all the other weird stuff people like to play with. CocoaPods, I think. Anyway, Roku didn't have that. And we wanted something like that to exist. So it's kind of been on my mind for a while. Just kind of like, you're sitting in the shower and you're driving places and you're just thinking about all this random stuff. And so I've been thinking about this. I've been talking to George about it a little bit. And I envisioned that we might start working on ROPM sometime maybe middle of next year. But a company that George works for, Applicaster, had expressed some interest in needing this feature sooner rather than later. And I think they were just about ready to start building out something of their own just for internal work. And George convinced them, like, no, let's get the community involved and let's actually design this thing out so that it's useful for everybody, not just for our own internal needs. So I went back and forth with Applicaster a little bit, got them to actually sponsor a little bit of my time to be able to make ROPM happen sooner. Gathered some of what they needed, which all of their requirements lined up with all of the requirements that I was envisioning. So there were no compromises there. But so about 2 months ago, I started working on ROPM. Might have been 3 months ago. And and it's in, we'll call it alpha, I think we're calling it right now, maybe beta, I don't know. It's mostly usable. There are definitely some rough edges, which we'll kind of go over this evening. But so in a nutshell, what ROPM is a package manager for Roku code. And one of the big reasons this hasn't existed yet is it's hard to do package management specifically for Roku because of all of the limitations of the platform. Specifically, we've got source scope and all the component scopes, and there's all of this opportunity for naming collisions. You've got a function in one file that's in the same scope as a function from another file, and all of a sudden you get a compile error on the device. So that makes everything really, really difficult to work around. So I'm going to go over some of the techniques that we've used to kind of work around those problems. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, I'll go with this one. Turn off Slack, because otherwise that'll explode. Okay, let me know when you folks can see my screen. You should see GitHub.
Yeah, we can see it.
Great. And I might even make a new desktop here just so that way you don't have to see Reaper there the whole time. Great. Okay. All right, so this is the ROPM README. And I need one more thing. There. Cool. So this is the ROPM README. I spend a lot of time on the documentation, and then George goes and doesn't even read it. So I have to, copy all the links from here. It's been fun. But so I tried really hard to get the documentation to be up to date and helpful, as well as verbose enough to kind of cover most of the edge cases and the normal things you would do for a package manager. So I'm going to kind of just run down through this because I think it was a waste of time to build a PowerPoint slide when all the information is right here in front of us. I guess I can go ahead and make this just a little bigger so that it's more approachable. So ROPM was written as a Node project. So it's written in Node.js, specifically TypeScript, compiled, transpiled down to JavaScript. And so to use it, you need to have Node running on your machine. And this is not unexpected considering all the rest of the Roku community tools are all written in Node. So you'll need to install Node.js, and then you'll need to install ROPM. And I have here that you can install it globally, but you could also install it as a local dependency and then execute it either in an NPM script or using npx. So the first thing is how do you know that a package is a ROPM package? So when we're publishing ROPM packages, you're actually going to be publishing them to an NPM style registry. And so generally that's going to be NPM, but you could also publish them to GitHub packages. If you have like an internal NPM registry that you use for some of your other projects, you can put them in there. I think Azure DevOps has like an NPM registry baked into it. I think like Nexus, if you're used to that, they have an NPM registry. But basically, anything that you can install an NPM package from, you could publish a ROPM package to. And the only thing that is required for your ROPM package is that you need to add the ROPM keyword. And I'll show you that. I have an example down here. But right here, inside your package JSON, you need to make sure that you add the ROPM keyword. And this has a couple of justifications. The first one is discoverability. We want you to be able to find ROPM packages in amongst all of the, hundreds of thousands of NPM packages. And so one of the easiest ways to do it is to make this keyword mandatory. So when you install a ROPM package, if you don't have the ROPM keyword in there, that package will be ignored by ROPM. So every ROPM package author needs to make sure that they have the ROPM keyword there. The other reason is a lot of developers, how do I want to say this? There's a confusion sometimes between dependencies and dev dependencies inside of a package JSON. And I've seen a lot of Roku developers that have dependencies for all of their build tooling. Like maybe they use TypeScript or TS Node or Roku Deploy or BrighterScript. And those end up in the dependencies section of your package JSON. That will cause havoc if we were going to run ROPM and copy all of those dependency code into your Roku package. You can have a ton of node modules that end up getting copied. So this is a way to say, regardless of how you have your package JSON configured between dependencies and dev dependencies, we're only going to pull the ones in that are explicitly marked as a Roku package. So then going off of that, if you wanted to find a ROPM package, we have this right here at the top. You can do this yourself, but I thought it was easy enough to put there. So you click here, and then it just takes you into a keyword search on NPM. And so here are a couple that we've kind of loaded up for the meetup tonight, but I mean, these are all functional as well, though. So, and you can't really search on GitHub for ROPM packages because they don't allow you to search by keywords. So you just have to know the name of the thing you want to find. One thing to note when you're creating ROPM packages and publishing them to NPM, the NPM terms of service says that most of the packages on there need to be runnable by JavaScript. And so there's always a chance that they may not like that our Roku packages are published there. However, I'm assuming everything published to NPM is going to be open source. And one of the primary ways that you consume ROPM packages is through ROPM. And so that is very much a Node project. So it gets a little fuzzy. I haven't asked them. I don't know that I want to. But at the end of the day, you as a package author get to pick where you put it. You can put it on GitHub packages. You can put it on one of your internal registries. So ROPM is kind of agnostic to that. It'll install wherever you want, from wherever you want. The other downside to GitHub packages is you cannot anonymously install GitHub packages. you have to be signed in with a GitHub token, even if you're installing public, non-protected packages. And so that's why we left the default registry with NPM. But again, it'll work for any registry. So any questions about that before we move on?
No.
Cool. All right. So I don't want to move on here. So, but I want to talk a little bit about how ROPM actually works then. What ROPM does is it will use NPM behind the scenes. I've been talking about NPM registry, but I'm actually now talking about the NPM command line tool that you get bundled in with every node installation. So you're actually going to end up with a node modules folder in your projects, even though we're not directly going to be consuming the items from node modules. We have a separate step to copy them. So behind the scenes, ROPM will use NPM to resolve all dependencies. It'll pull all things down into node modules. And from that point, we're going to be copying all of those files into your project directory. So let's move on here. I want to get, so one of the difficulties with the NPM package naming is that you can have a whole bunch of characters that are not valid bright script identifiers. And so what ROPM will do to resolve all of the naming conflicts is we're actually going to derive a prefix for whatever package you install, and all of your functions and your components will actually have a prefix added to them. And this is to prevent naming collisions. And so the first step in that is coming up with the name. So that name is derived from the NPM name. Like for example here, we've got cool package. We're going to strip out all of the dashes and every other symbol other than underscores. And so you'll end up with, cool package. This is a namespaced package right here, Roku/sgdex. This doesn't exist. It was just an example. So this is an NPM namespace, I think is what they call it, or an NPM scope, an NPM scope. And so we're going to strip out the @ symbol. And because NPM treats them separately, this is going to turn that into an underscore. And so you end up with Roku/sgdex, _sgdex. So once we have the namespace, the prefix, we're going to go through every single package and we're going to find functions. We're going to find function calls. We're going to find function references. Like notice this one isn't a call. It's just the pointer to the actual function in memory. We're going to find every function name in observed field calls. We're going to find every component. We're going to find the extends attribute in components. We're going to find where components are used as elements in XML files. And then we're going to apply a prefix to each one of them. The prefix being this thing up here, the name of the package. So here's an example. So if we've got a ROPM package called Fancy Keyboards, when you go to install that, the source code from Fancy Keyboards right here will be changed to this. And so we put that prefix in front of it. Same thing for your Bright script code. So these are functions that are defined inside of Fancy Keyboard. And we're going to rename those, and we're going to add a prefix in front of all of them. So what this means as a ROPM consumer is that for all of the packages that you consume, you'll need to define what the package prefix will be. You can use the default, obviously, but if you don't like the name of one of them, you can change them, and we'll get into that a little bit later. You're going to have to reference all of the files and functions by their prefix. So the next section here is file paths. So actually, I'm gonna skip down here and find where is the path? I thought I had a section in here about file paths, but One sec. Just have to find that. There it was.
It's inside the prefix naming.
Are you saying it was up here? Can someone let Joe Test in, please?
Yeah, right there. It should be right above that file path. Yep.
Right, yeah, so what I wasn't actually the section I was looking for, but it's all good. So I want to talk a little bit about how the files will actually be copied. So when you create a ROPM module, you're going to have it looking like a regular Roku app. You'll have your components folder, your source folder, images folder, whatever. You can have whatever folder structures you want. And then what happens is whenever somebody ROPM installs your project, your package, we're actually going to make a Roku modules folder inside of each of those top level folders. I want to find, here we go. That's the one I was looking for right there. So, for example, if we have a module called logger, what's going to happen is inside of your source project, this is your source folder. This is your components folder. We're going to make a Roku modules folder underneath that. And then underneath that will be the name of the module. And then below that would be all the contents inside the logger's source file folder. And it seems a little counterintuitive at first. Like you would think that you would want to have just like one Roku modules folder at the top level. But the problem is the moment you put it outside of your project structure, you now have to put in a build system to move the code into the right spot. By doing it this way, we're able to handle all file naming collisions, make it very clear that you are using third-party code because every one of those paths is going to have Roku modules in it as part of the file path. And from a git ignore perspective, you can just ignore Roku modules and all of those will be hidden. This also works with the existing language server functionality inside of the Visual Studio Code extension. There's nothing you have to do to make this work. You just ROPM install, all the files get put in the right spots, and the language server picks them all up automatically. Roku deploy also works with this approach. So it was the best way forward. So moving on then, I think we did that. We talked about the prefixes. Another item that it will do is it's going to look for all file paths. Because we're moving files around, like what was just source lib.brs becomes source name of library, Roku modules, name of library, lib.brs. So we obviously have to fix all of those file paths. So within all the Roku modules, we're going to go through and we're going to replace all of the package paths to the Roku modules equivalent. So you look here, package images, and the image name will become images Roku modules, name of library, and then the image name. So there is a caveat to the package renaming in that if you have a full package path that let's say there's a library that wanted to look for a specific config file at the root of an application. If they were to do like pkg:/config file, that'll end up getting renamed. And so we drew the distinction that if there's a string with the literal text pkg:/ and nothing else, then we're not actually going to rewrite that. So that gives you a way to work around the package renaming. I think that's pretty uncommon, but again, if there are issues with that, please raise them on the GitHub project, and we can work through any issues that you may have. Any questions so far?
So you're saying that you would literally just have pkg/ by itself, and then you add on the extra part so that it knows that
Correct.
You shouldn't mess with this.
Correct. You could. I mean, basically, we look for pkg:/ and another character. So I mean, you could do like P and then K and then G and then colon. if you wanted to make it crazy, but we promise that we won't rewrite this specifically, that you have to have at least one more character for us to know that we're supposed to rewrite the PKG path.
Got it.
Yeah. Again, I think that's going to be the exception, not the rule. Most projects and packages are just going to point to picture images or XML files or scripts or whatever. They're not going to be expecting a file at the root of an application. Most of the time, it'll be something you can pass in, but we wanted to guard against that just in case. So there are a couple functions that are never prefixed, and that would be these right here. So don't define those functions if you don't want them to collide with other scopes. I mean, you're all used to these functions, so it's not a big deal, but I don't really know why you would have most of these in your ROPM packages anyway, because these should be like userland functions. But anyway, so moving on then. Sometimes you don't like the name of a package. For example, let's say you don't like the name Roku Promise, because that's going to turn into, where'd my launch go? Like this. So for example, a Roku Promise like this would end up being Roku Promise. We take out the dash. So maybe you don't like that. Maybe it's just too verbose. So what you can do is this is built in NPM syntax. We're not inventing anything here. This is already supported in your regular package JSON. You can specify that it comes from an NPM registry. This is the name from NPM, and this is the version. And this is the name you want it to be. So it's going to install Roku Promise. It's going to put it in the promise folder. Promise will be the name of the prefix. So promise will be what you use to prefix all of the functions and components that come from this package. This gets very flexible. I know that George has been using a lot of like 1 or 2 character prefixes to keep his code light and lean. So you can use that for any package that you want, and we'll honor that. Just remember that these names get sanitized based on the naming conventions that I talked about up here.
Hey, Bron, do you mind if I just add like a set of those? In a moment, I'm going to do a demo of all of this stuff. So don't worry about having to absorb absolutely everything, because we're going to show you how it all works in a real application in a moment.
Right, yeah, so based on these rules, the sanitizing rules that we talked about earlier. So, okay, moving on then. The next thing I want to talk about is semantic versioning. Versioning of a package is, it's generally important in most ecosystems, but for something like NPM, because the node module system is, you can have it nested. You could have one package that depends on version 1, another package depends on version 2, another package depends on version 3. It works out fine because you can just put them in the correct folders and everybody gets their own copy. On Roku, there are a couple of problems with that. Well, the biggest being you're going to blow out the size of your projects if we have all of these different versions of packages. You're going to blow out the RAM if you're using a ton of it. You can run into performance issues. And so we made the decision to strictly, to advise package authors to strictly adhere to semantic versioning. And what that means is if, I guess to go over semantic versioning real quick, the first number in semantic versioning is the major number. Anytime the major version changes, you can expect there to be breaking changes. You renamed a function, you deleted something. The minor version, that increments anytime there are new changes to a package. You added a function, you added an optional parameter at the end that won't break existing functionality. And then your patch version is the third number, and that represents bug fixes. So, generally speaking, when you're following semantic versioning, you can increment the minor and the patch number as much as you want, and you should theoretically never run into breaking changes. Not everybody follows that. There are various libraries out there like AngularJS, like version 1. Like every minor bump was actually some breaking changes. But with ROPM and because of the nature of the Roku ecosystem, we're going to expect that package authors follow this strictly. And the reason for that is we're going to pick the highest one in each major range. So in this example, consider you have Roku Promise version 1.1.0 and Roku Promise version 1.4.0. Because both of these are 1.x.y or y.z, we're going to pick 1.4.0. So whatever packages depend on Roku version 1.1.0 will be given 1.4.0. So you're going to have to keep that in mind as you're creating packages, but unfortunately, there's not really a big way around this other than blowing out all of the Roku RAM, and I don't think we want our package sizes getting bigger. So here is another example. You've got 1.1.0, 1.4.0, 2.0.0, and 2.3.4. So because these two are in the same major range, we're going to use 1.4.0 for both of these. So 1.1.0 will not be included. We'll only do 1.4.0. And then, because 2.0.0 and 2.3.4 are in the same range, we're going to pick 2.3.4. And then dealing with pre-releases, pre-releases are extremely unstable. Like, you're never guaranteed that anything will be the same between beta 1 and beta 2. Each one of these will be treated as their own. So we don't advise you, depending on have production code depend on beta releases. You can, but you're going to end up with a lot more code in your project if you have multiple dependencies that depend on different beta versions. So once we've picked the versions of these packages, we're going to have to come up with a prefix for each of them. And let me interject here and say that most of these renamings will happen behind the scenes. Any package that you depend on in the client application is going to follow the exact prefix that you've provided. So Roku Promise, for example, even if some of your dependencies depend on a different version than you, it's going to be called Roku Promise. This is all for, like, if you've got a dependency that has a dependency that has a dependency, all of those inner working code, they're going to have their code prefixed. But your code, you're going to use the pretty names here, Logger and Simplest. But what we do is, because we're only matching on each major version number, we're going to prefix based on the major version number there. So that's what will end up being called file logger and complex list there. Any questions about that?
I'm really curious about what it's going to look like if you have transitive dependencies and referencing the name that you want to use for your dependencies.
Yeah, so we build a graph of the entire dependency tree. So every single dependency of yours and your dependencies, so on and so forth, all of them are built into this graph. And then we do renames across the board. So anyone anywhere that depends on file logger version 2. whatever will be given this exact prefix. So all of the modules will have their function calls, component names, etc., renamed based on this prefix. Hopefully that answers your question, but I can show you some of the, if you're interested offline, I can show you some of the unit tests that show the transitive dependencies and how everything gets renamed across the board.
So kind of my question is, how do you use, if you create a Roku module, a Roku library, and you want to use a Roku Promise, for instance, how do you call you install the dependency within your module, and in your code you say, you call the constructor for the Roku promise, which is going to be to have the friendly name that you have chosen for Roku promise. Correct?
Right. Yeah. So it would be Roku promise underscore make me a promise, whatever that function is, create.
And that means that once you install that within the client application, the code in this library that uses Roku promise would be rewritten with.
Yes. Yeah. We rewritten, in that case, it'd be like Roku promise underscore v1, for example. If the client application doesn't depend on Roku promise. But if the client application does depend on Roku promise, then it would be called Roku promise. And your module that you had published would have its code rewritten to match the prefix of the client application for that.
Okay, exactly. So you change the code in each of the module based on the whatever differentiation you need. Okay.
Right, exactly. We didn't want to push like the nasty V1, V2 stuff onto the client. And so all client dependencies get the name that they chose. And everything else will have theirs rewritten based on V1, V2. But the trickle-down effect is if the client application and one of your modules depend on the same package, then yay, your published package, when it's installed in that client app, will get the pretty name, the less verbose name.
Cool.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right, moving on. So there are situations where you want to disable prefixing for a module. For example, we have like Roku logger. And let's say there are 4 functions in there: log info, log warning, log error, and I missed one, but whatever. We got those standard log function names, and you know that you're not using those anywhere in your code. And you might as well just be able to call log warning rather than having to call Roku logger underscore log warning. So if you wanted to disable prefixing for an individual dependency, what you do is you add it to the ROPM inside your package JSON. There's a no prefix key. And for all of the packages that you don't want prefixed, you would add them to that list. This is here for convenience, but I've made it just a little bit painful to add because every time you add a package to this list, you run the risk of file name, functions in scope that will collide in your source scope, for example. So component names, 2 of the same component name, that actually won't, Brian, am I right that it won't cause a compile error with 2 components with the same name?
Correct. It'll just
picks the first one or the last one?
You won't know which one caused it, but
right.
Yeah, and so it can cause some painful bugs to try and figure out why it's not working the way it's supposed to. Yeah.
So the reason I pushed this into the client application is because the client needs to make those decisions for their packages. So you cannot say my package that I'm publishing will not be prefixed. Your package will always be prefixed, except when the client, the consumer of your package, decides they don't want to. So that's there. It works great in all my unit tests. It works great on my machine. George was having some weird issues with it when he was testing today. So I have some quirks to work out with that. But if you play with these things and you run into issues, just keep that in mind. Let me know. Love to see some more reproducible projects that cause the bug that George was seeing. But it seems like it works. So, but anyway, so this name right here, if anybody has been using ROPM, the current version that's published, I just pushed a change today. Previously, I was having you add the ROPM alias. So that would have been Roku logger without a dash. But it didn't make much sense. It was confusing. So now what you're going to put in is the left-hand side of the dependency here. Whatever you're actually calling the package, that's what you put in here. And then there's also another feature request to add when you install a ROPM package, like a -- no prefix command argument. So that way it'll automatically add them in there. But so keep in mind, you cannot use no prefix as a package author. The only people that can use this are client applications, the application that actually publishes the code of the Roku project. to the Roku device. If you have no prefix in your published ROPM package, ROPM will refuse to install it. And the big reason for that is we need to have these prefixes available in your package to know what to replace. We're not building a full dependency graph of every function and every component across the board. We've done some optimizations to make that faster, but we don't know where every function came from. And so we do some bulk renaming just based on prefix underscore name of function. So that's why there's that limitation. So don't use no prefix when you're creating ROPM packages. And that's what that says. This is kind of obvious for me using Node for a while and NuGet, but the Roku modules folders should not be altered at all. The whole point of a package manager is that you never store the source code in your repository. It shows up in there as you're working, but they should always be ignored from your git ignore, and you should not be editing that code directly. In the past, because there has been no package manager for Roku development, you're used to copying files in, maybe tweaking them a little bit, and that's no longer recommended when you're using Roku modules. Leave those folders alone, ignore them, forget about them. If there's a problem, reach out to the package author, have them fix the issue, or fork it and publish your own version with the changes that you need. So, I showed you this earlier that you have a ROPM keyword inside your package JSON. Not all packages want to have their code at the top level. Sometimes you may want to have a source folder or a dist folder if you're using something like Brighter Script to transpile your code. And so ROPM needs to know where you want it to put the code, all the ROPM modules. And so that's what this rootdir flag is for. So what it's saying is, when you run ROPM install, I want you to do everything relative to the source folder. So that will be source / components / Roku modules, It'll be source / images / Roku modules, So this is probably one of the few ROPM flags that people will frequently use. I think there are a lot of folks that have their source code in like a nested folder. And so just keep in mind, this is here. When you run ROPM init, which is one of these commands down here, I don't even have it there. When you run ROPM init, it's going to actually ask you for where your source folder is. So you should be able to pick that right off the bat. Okay, so we got a couple of commands. These are fairly straightforward. You want to ROPM install Roku Promise. You want to install these 3 modules. You can chain them together. There's also clean, and that will delete all the Roku modules folders from your project. There's copy, and so the difference between copy and install is ROPM install is going to run the npm install command. It's going to pull down all the node modules, and npm is really slow. And so if you know that you just want to rerun a copy, maybe you changed the name of a package or something, you just want to copy the files again, you can run ROPM copy, and that's going to skip npm install. The only thing it's going to do is reapply all of the prefixing for your packages. And this is going to be, if you're developing a local ROPM package, this is going to be your best friend because it drastically cuts down on the time. And then uninstall, you can remove one. So that's the majority of it. I have a couple of helpful hints here for package authors that you can look through if you're interested. I envision most folks will kind of stop here because they're not creating Roku modules, but I did want to point out that ROPM uses the Brighter Script parser internally so that it can find various syntax information. And so it's not transpiling the code, it's just using it to build the AST for each one of the files to find all the function references, etc. So there are situations where, as a ROPM author, package author, you might have some syntax that would break during a ROPM install. And we want to fix all of those syntax problems. The idea is that the Brighter Script parser should eventually have full parity with syntax on a Roku device. It's just there's only so many hours in the day. So I just keep that in mind. Yeah, most of this is for package author stuff. I don't think I want to dig into that too much. I want George to be able to get into his demos. But the one other thing I wanted to mention for package authors is that, where was it? Yeah, this one right here. So currently, function references is a package-wide operation. And what that means is we don't currently look in each scope to see which function should be prefixed or not. So when you define a component and it has an interface, this do something function, that's the name that you call from the outside of this component when you want to communicate with this component. And as such, if we were to prefix this function to like logger underscore do something, that means all the consumers of your component have to call logger underscore do something in their call func. And that's gross. So we do not prefix these functions. So that means within the context of this scope, the do something function needs to be called do something. And currently, we look for the do something function across your whole application. So just across your whole module. So just keep that in mind. Ideally, in the future, I want to get to per scope renaming, but it just the logic kind of ballooned out on me. I wasn't able to get that nailed down yet. So yeah, just keep that in mind. And then one other item here. So you have root dir, which is where you want to install ROPM modules in your project. And then package root dir is, let's say you're writing a BrightersScript application and you have a source folder with your your BrightersScript code, and then it transpiles through a pre-processing step into the dist folder. And dist is actually what you want people to install from a ROPM module. So you would specify package root dir in your ROPM package JSON settings to say, pick the dist folder for my files. So yeah, that's about all I wanted to cover here. That gives you an overview. So before we get into the demo, does anybody have any other questions about the implementation or anything ROPM related?
Yeah, so one, did you get around to not renaming the code that you use by components? Or is it the thing that you said you were not really going into because you need to manage the scoping?
Are you sure you're talking about this right here?
No, I mean the let's say the functions in logger component.brs here.
Right. So all of these functions will get renamed except the ones listed here.
So, though it is not necessary in principle.
So if you follow a very strict practice of this file will only ever be included in this component, like your code behind concept, then in theory that would make sense. However, on the Roku platform, there are absolutely ways for you to pull in like a common file that is used across 40 components. And you've got like maybe you've got some standardized component initialization logic that you actually pull in. You can have scopes that start to merge all over the place.
Yeah. I mean,
and so as a result of that,
okay.
in order to be safe, we do end up renaming all of the functions and all the function calls except for these. I don't want to push the convention too hard on these because there are very legitimate patterns for sharing code across scopes.
And for like field change handlers and things like that?
Yeah, so field change handlers would be renamed. I was just made aware today that I forgot those. So the on change on field currently does not get renamed in the XML, but it gets renamed in the BrightersScript. So I have to fix that. But the on change field for fields, there's no reason it shouldn't be renamed because that's not a publicly declared API here. So it doesn't matter what the function is as long as the XML
it's fine
code
to
behind
rename.
name are the same.
So yeah, and so you will automatically rename when it's observe field scoped, guess, but no other uses of the function as name. You know, other patterns that would use the name of the function to resolve. Well, no, that's not for this type of functions. No, that should be a case.
Right. Yeah, and if you find any edge cases, please let me know as you're playing around with this. I'm sure I've missed some. Something pops out of the workbench.
Like the change handlers.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Well, I guess we'll move on to the demo portion. So, George, if you want to go ahead and take over, I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, cheers. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sweet. I'll share my screen. Just hypershare. And are you able to see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful.
And remember, George, we're not as fast as you, so go slower.
Chaotic, fast. Okay, that's a compliment coming from you. Well, first up, I just want to say a big thanks to Bron for his hard work. I'm going to put two hats on here. First is my Applicaster hat. As he noted at the start of his presentation, we at Applicaster do have a need for a package manager. We have a framework that we're very proud of on Roku and on the other platforms that has modular building and the ability for people to build any app they want using Applicaster's platform and ingest any modules as part of Applicaster's offering, and also you can make third-party modules. And so having the facility to do that on Roku is of strategic importance to Applicaster, and they asked me to do it, and I just told them, frankly, Bron will be way better at doing it. And having got to try the cookies before they're baked every step of the way, I can attest that's been the case. And Bron, you've done a really fantastic job. And I know Ran and the team at Applicaster are really proud of you as well for that. So thank you. The other one is with my developer hat on as a Roku developer. And this is going to be recorded, and I hope we'll show this to people of influence in the community in the coming months. We've obviously got the hardcore of we all know each other on this call, most of us. I think this is a really important moment for us as a community because, as we know from working on our other platforms, code sharing is oftentimes the spark that leads to a far deeper and better and richer experience on any platform. So this is hopefully going to inspire you guys to look at this and think about how you can share code with each other in the community in a better way. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to do a demo quickly showing off how to use ROPM as an application client. And
is OBS, is that a screensaver on your machine or?
That is, yeah. Patience, it'll make sense in a second. Don't look at the pretty things, Bron. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go ahead and make something, okay? So I'm going to try and do as much code as I can without copy pasting. So I'm going to make a new Roku project. Right, text will get bigger in a second. So let's make some files for our project. We're going to make ourselves a manifest. We're going to make ourselves a source folder, just like making a new Roku project. Then we'll make some files to go with this, okay? So we're going to make a and then we'll add some settings. Some of this stuff I'm just going to do fast because there's no point wasting time on it. Add a new file, main file. Standard fare, just create a scene called main scene. We'll go ahead and make that right away. Let's change it to...
You missed the E in main scene.
Thank you. Okay, and then here we'll just have
for helpful diagnostic right there. I liked that.
Yeah, isn't the LSP beautiful? Why is this giving me that? I can't find decoration on the component. Oh yeah, that's because I use. Do you guys use this? I hope you do. That wonderful scene graph schema tool. Is it going to run? See the what I call it from demo. So if we use that, then we get. I don't know if you guys do that, but it gets you like proper completions for, you know, your Roku components, etc. So anyway, so we're set up. We've got a main scene, and then we should theoretically be able to run that. Let's do that. I might make it a bit clearer what I'm doing. Now my screen's going to make a bit more sense, Bron. So that's there, so we can see what's happening. And that should be running the app. Looks like, yep, it is. I don't think it's doing anything. So what we're going to do is just make sure it's going home. I think my Roku actually crashed. That's all good. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a logger. And to do that, let's head over to ROPM. We're going to use ROPM Package Manager. And as Bron noted, there's a link in here that tells you where to discover packages. I've got a bookmark to it here, and hopefully this is going to be something we'll increasingly do over the coming months. And we can see there's already a few of these. We've got a logger called Roku Log. The BrightScript community is taking stewardship of Roku requests and the Roku Promise frameworks, which are both popular frameworks on Roku. And we've added some other ROPM packages to try and get things kick-started. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start with a logger. And then if we look at Roku Log, we can see here there's the ROPM package here. It's got information about using it, full installation instructions, and how to use it. So we'll just go ahead and follow those instructions. So if we go back to our terminal, we could do it in VS Code. So we're in the demo folder of our terminal. I'll bring my Roku back. What I'm going to do, I'm going to say ROPM install, and I'm going to refer to this as log. Call npm Roku-log. And what that's going to do, that's going to create the ROPM package for me. We can see that in our editor. We can see we've now got a package JSON. That was created automatically by ROPM. I didn't need to know anything about npm to do that, just did it for me. Thank you, Bron. And we can see in there it's already made the entry for us and saved it for the Roku logger. Okay, and now what's going to happen is when we go back to our main scene, we can see that we already have access to log underscore. Let me space it one second. Take a look at the instructions. So the instructions say we're going to use the log initialize log manager method. I'm going to reload my workspace just in case, because it should give me code completion for that. And we're going to, so we go refer to our instructions, initialize log manager. And there we go, it's done. Oh, I know why it's doing it. It doesn't know what this is. So what we need to do, we need to import it into our node. So we're going to do that. We're going to say, we'll just say, don't make me type everything. Slash log slash log mixing.pr.
I think you need, yeah, there you go. You got it now.
So now we've got that in scope, and we can see we've already got all of the log methods that come with that. So that initializes us a logger, and we're going to do a log register logger. We're going to call it a main scene. And now once we've done that, we've got the log methods for log info, log debug, etc. available on M, any way you do it. And there's an API for the logger that explains how to use it. It's got different transports like print transport, screen transport. You can, as a node one as well, you can add your own transports to it. So you can node to socket or whatever, like if you want to write your own one, maybe contribute it, install it as a ROPM package. Let's run that and see if that runs without crashing my Roku this time. Invalid package. That's fun. Launch JSON. Anything wrong there? No.
Did you fill out your manifest yet? I think that might still be empty.
Yeah, thank you, mate. It's Hawkeyes, maybe. Let's do UI resolution equals. Is that right, guys? I don't remember that.
With an S.
What's that?
Resolutions.
Thank you. Cool. Okay, so let's see if that works. So we're running our app, and if we look in here, it's running, and you can see from here, info, hello from ROPM. So with very little work, we've already got a logger into our app, so we can do things like m.log error. You can chain arguments together. You can put in things like that. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on the logger. I just want to make the case that it's very trivial to add these kind of things. So let's run that again, and then we'll have another. So for example, if we want, there you go. And if we want to add currently we're using log print transport, but we can use a log screen transport. Let's run the app again. And then we'll start doing something more interesting in a second. Okay, so in a second you see our app will come up, and that's loading. And you can see there's an on-screen transport there for the screen as well, so you can log to screen. Got the same thing to log to nodes for rail introspection and things like that, inspection, sorry. Now what we'll do is we'll go out to the net and we'll go and grab some data, and there's a library for doing that. So I'm just going to install this one without the prefix. Just going to say npm install Roku requests. And there we go, it's gone off, it's got the packages for me, it's all in there. And we know that when we use Roku request, because it's using the net in the background, we're going to need a task. So let's go and do that. We're going to make a task called net task as well, with the right name. Okay, and I'm just going to do that in here. Just this is I'm sure you guys have got similar things for doing this kind of thing. And then when we pull this in, we're going to go to Roku modules. And we're going to use Roku request / why am I getting confusion?
George, Roku request not going to have the dash.
Yeah, thanks, Melly.
Because the prefix.
Is that right? That's in Roku requests. Yep, Roku request. Roku request.brs. Let me reload it, because sometimes the workspace gets stuck. Hopefully that's all it is. Let's see. So we've got our task created. There's no file for net task. Let's make that. And then,
Yep, wrong one.
okay, so what's upset about that for? Roku requests. I'm just going to check. As Bron said, you can see it makes the Roku modules folder, and that's source. Roku modules. So source. Yeah, you're right. Wrong one. Roku requests. Oops, wrong way. So, and as Bron said, it creates the Roku modules folders, which you obviously are going to ignore. They just become part of your code base. And the great thing about that is, of course, that you get completions for them. You can take a look at methods from the modules as if they're part of your own code, which is handy. So let's do some more task stuff in here. We're going to call this a net task. And here we're going to get some data. Equals to, and then because we didn't prefix this, it comes with the default prefix, which is Roku requests. Requests.get, and we're going to give it a URL. I'm going to go out and hit this URL here. It's got some canned data, just a bunch of JSON that we can pull back. So let's go and grab that, and then we'll say is okay as data doesn't look valid. I don't know about you guys. I use the same notation for all my tasks. So I'll return output, and we'll return the. Let's rename that. Sorry. Okay, so I'm going to go off to Roku request, get a result and pass it back. And then what we'll do in our main task, main scene, sorry, is we'll create one of those tasks. We'll then just start, run. And we'll observe that before we do that actually. It's output. That'll do. So hopefully we should find that this works. Let's do something like that. And then what we'll do, because it's interesting, we'll say m.log. We'll log that. I have no idea if that's going to work, but let's try.
Fingers
So-
crossed.
You can see the log is executing right. Went into the execute run loop. M.output. No? Okay. And maybe, and there's no data. Result dot. Okay, let's try that. But we can see already we've got logging in our task. It's calling the log methods and everything. So we're getting benefits of that. We're doing our get method. We're getting our response, got some data back. Usually, I thanks to Felipe to your fantastic work on the plugin system, I get line numbers first. I could just click in my logs. And the logger package does actually explain how one goes about doing that. There's instructions at the bottom. All you do is just add a plugin and you get the ability to add line numbers, which I find very hard to live without. So there we go. So already we've got data coming back from the wire. I'm going to just cut a step out here because it's just, it's going to be a lot of work to type everything. I don't want to type everything. So we've got a method to make nodes. That's just iterating over the data and pulling some stuff out. So let's just do that, okay? And we're going to do that here if you guys don't mind. So now we're getting some nodes back. What we'll do is, because we know our task is working, we're going to go back to our main scene. So we're showing that we're now using a net task. We're going out using Roku request. We're using the logger. Let's display some data. So we're going to create a row list. What's that doing now? That's weird. Let's update this quickly. For some reason it's not happy with that. I'm not going to type all that stuff out. So what we'll do is we'll just go and grab that. So imagine we've got a row list. It's just got the ability to show a bunch of rows. Because let's face it, it's kind of boring typing it out. We'll get rid of our screen transport for the logs. I'll just go back to the default options because I don't want that all over my screen. And what we'll do is when we get the data, let's create our row list. So we're going to say, make a row list, and we shall set the data on that row list. While we're at it. So see that. I'm going to just go through a couple more bits here. Shouldn't take too long to get there. So we've got some data showing, got some data back. We can see we've got a row list coming back already of our data. That's all very nice. But we want to do something a bit more interesting. So what we're going to do, we're going to add another ROPM module. So let's install an image fader. I'm going to prefix this because, like Bron says, I like to keep things really short. And we're going to get that from ROPM. We go back to see our packages, and we can see that's an image fader, so we can use that. I think it's got some documentation with it saying how to use it. If it doesn't, the documentation is on the GitHub. Bron, I need to find out from you why documentation doesn't show up in NPM for some things than others, but we'll do that offline because I'd like to have it there for all of
Yeah, most likely it's because you've updated the docs, but we didn't publish a new version.
Okay, gotcha.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, nice one. Thanks, mate. So here, again, you've got instructions. And so what we're going to do, I install it like that. It's called Roku Image Fader. And then what I do personally, each time I install one of these packages, because I know it contains components, I do that. That updates my schema so that I've got access to it. Go back to my main scene. And I'm going to put image fader, I'll stick that behind there. So I go image fader, and you can see I've already got it as part of my schema. So we're going to call this image fader. And let's set the width to height to 1080. And we'll get a reference to that image fader. Obviously, this stuff is old hat to you guys. I'm trying to go fast. And then what we shall do is we need to observe our row list. Item focused. Is that right, guys? I never remember the APIs for this stuff. I don't use row list anymore most of the time. So if that's wrong, let me know. On row item focus, no? I'm assuming it's, I'll just double check in here. On row item focus. Yeah. Okay, so let's do that. We'll just make a handler for that. Okay, and then we'll just say our end.image fader UI is equal to item dot. I'm not typing that, it's too much work. I'll put a little log meshes in there as well. Then hopefully that will run. And we should see it's loading our data. It's got our data back, and we've got a crash on get child index, blah, blah. I didn't like that. Probably, right, focus. I'll just debug it real quick. Probably doesn't want 2 rows in there. Okay, so we load our data, and we've got an image fader. And so you can see how quick. And again, like given the current company I'm in on the call, I'm hoping this is inspiring you guys to think about what things we can do that are gonna help people in a community to make good apps quickly. Because imagine if you could just reach out and just as a newbie get this stuff, but as well, I'm sure we can share some fascinating components with each other. Just gonna add a couple more. Just want to show a couple of use cases, right? So if we go back, the other thing we're going to do is we're going to add a loading spinner. I've got that stored locally, so I'm going to do a ROPM install, and I'm going to give it a name, which I'm going to call it loading spinner.
Yeah, George, if I could jump in here too. Because we use NPM behind the scenes, we do have support for local plugin development. So you would just do exactly like George is doing now. You file the file protocol there, and you can install any local package as well. And that's where the ROPM copy would come in. So anytime George would make a change to that local loading indicator code, just run ROPM copy, and it will recopy the files out into your local project. So yeah, just keep that in mind though. We do have full support for local package development. You don't have to like be publishing them to test them. You can do it all locally.
And to add to that, because I've already been doing a fair amount of module development, I can attest that it works really well. There's really no problems with it. You find out, I think, nearly all the kinks now as it goes. So let's set that to Okay, that's looking good. Again, apologies, I don't type this stuff anymore because you guys know I use BriderScript, I use a different framework. So I honestly, if I was doing this as a BriderScript Maestro demo, there would be no code at this point, there'd be nothing. I'm kind of not used to typing any of this stuff, to be completely frank. What do I call it? Loading into game. And then we'll say, from the get-go, we'll make it active. And once we do our load, we'll make it inactive. So
inactive there, that's a field on the component that you installed, right, George? That's
exactly. I don't know if my capture card picked it up, but you should have seen us loading spinner while it was loading. There you go. You can just see the text loading. That's because I don't have an image in there. Let's rectify that quickly by just grabbing the images folder from here. Bear with me one sec. Sorry. So we're going to do it. May as well make it look pretty. Just a couple more things to go, guys. Okay, and then I think that will hammer home what we're doing with, or what Bron's been doing with ROPM. So is that going to run? Okay. Then we can see loading spin's going to appear while we're having a cheeky little load. You can't see because my screen's so dark, but just trust me, it's there. Another thing, like for example, one of the things that led me to build one of the components that I built for this demo is that I oftentimes see in the Slack chats that people ask about text components. So we decided to make one. It's not fully featured at all. It's just to spark a conversation. So we've got a smart label component is what it's called. And we'll stick one of those into our main scene. So let's do the following. I'm going to copy this from the we're going to stick that in above the image fader loader list. Okay, so we've got a rectangle, we've got a smart label, same deal. Okay, and then I'm going to grab some code from here because the smart label, I'll show you real quick. It has an API that allows you to show a mixture of different text styles, and it's like BB edit, as Felipe said. But there's an API for it that allows you to set different font styles for different text that appears in there, and you can use templating for different values. And that's what we're going to do now. So I'm just going to go and grab the label code here. I'll show it to you quickly, but so we've got some label code. All we do is we get the label, we set all the font settings. So whenever it gets a header 2 font, it's going to use this. Whenever it gets an italic font, it's going to use this. And then we say this is the text that appears in it, and it's all templated. So that's going to use the title, that's going to use description, that's running time, whatever. And we can then start doing some rich text formatting. And what I shall do is, I'll just do that now. I'll just set the configure label. So the label's configured, and when we focus an item, what we'll do, we'll just say m.label.values, because we've already set the text, we're going to set the values that drive it, and I'm going to actually copy that from here. The API is there, it's really straightforward, you guys will be able to understand it easily. So you can just set the text, or you can set to something templated, which is obviously very useful for the kind of things that we do. So I'm just saying, whenever you see the title, use it from the item title, description, get it from there, and, I even make some images for it. It's going to look garish. The point isn't to look good, I'm afraid, at this point. So we go in here, and it's loading. Where is it loading? Where is it crashed? Oh, there we go. And so there's a smart text label. I'm going to make this a bit big so you can see. You can see we've got a mixture of different font styles. We're mixing like regular and bold and different font text. And again, I don't know about you guys, like if you can imagine going back a couple of years ago, like how much time did you spend faffing around with this kind of crap? It should be like other platforms. It should be like NuGet or like NPM. We should just be able to install this stuff, work on it together, collaborate, and get the benefits from each other's work without having to spend inordinate amounts of time making tweak components. So I'm just going to add one more one locally, just to show you one other use case, which I think some of you may like, especially those of you who are experimenting with cell renderers and cell reuse and the ability to have dynamic content in your row lists. So I'm using a a simple cell that I've got locally. It's called simple cell. It's a cell style. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to, in here on my row list, I'm going to use an item component name, and it's called simple cell because, as Bron alluded to in his presentation, things get prefixed with the prefixes we gave it. But if you excuse me, I'm actually going to copy this XML from the other file because I just did a couple of changes that I don't want to tweak now because it's late and you guys being very patient. So, but essentially all I did was just add the simple cell item component type and a couple of other things just to tidy up the view a bit. And we do this. So if we take a look now, we can see without doing any code, I just went off to ROPM, I found a package someone's made and they got something that does what I want. You can't see very clearly on my capture card because it's slow as crap, but there's like a fade animation in there. I don't know about you guys, like some of you guys have been around, I think everyone's been around a lot longer than I have. But I know when I started, I couldn't have built this app in 20 minutes. It would have just been utterly impossible. I could have copy and pasted a bunch of fragile code. This code, thanks to Bronley's endeavors, is reusable, it's supported, it's open source, it's visible, it's maintainable. We don't have to own any of it. Once you've got faith in a vendor or in a component or contribute to a component, you can use it and share it with other people. And it opens all kinds of possibilities. Last one I'm going to add is just for the sheer crack of it. Install I've got an animated poster. This is something I need in some upcoming client apps, so I just build it quickly because we've all seen everyone doing the same thing over and over again. So I've got some code here that runs animated posters. So let's just stick some posters into this example. And then this animated poster has an API, all documentation is there, so it might even be in ROPM. So if we go in here, but if we go to the Git, we can see that this animated poster has a simple API, fully documented examples of how to use it, like it's sprite sheet based, it tells you how to do the offsets. And so in no time whatsoever, I've stuck that into my app and let's see what we get. So I don't know about you guys, but I don't know how possible it was for you to build that app. How long do you think it's been going? About 20 minutes, right? Okay, I did copy and paste a couple of bits of code, but I could have probably made this in 30 minutes. And I hope everyone on this call realizes what a game changer that could be for us guys in the Roku development community, being able to share trusted packages with each other and be able to do far more componentized building of applications. I've tried my best to show you how easy it is to edit the code locally. I don't think we need to go into that now unless anyone wants some questions on that, but it might be we revisit that, Bron, because I think we should start encouraging people to make packages. It's very easy to make them. There's already like 5 or 6 Roku modules out there that you can use and just copy those projects to make your own components with. I just want to add here the sponsorship page. As we all know, Bronley has a sponsorship page. I can't thank you enough, Bron, for the work you do. My life is better every day as a result of the tools that you make, and this one's no exception. I really do appreciate this. Like I say, Applicaster appreciates it. Some of my other clients really appreciate it as well. They're really looking forward to using it. So unless there's any specific questions on the demo stuff I've just done, in which case, has anyone got a question on that?
No.
Sounds like we're good. In that case, Bron. What's that, Maddie?
I thought I heard somebody speak up, but no, I guess we're good.
Okay, cool. I'll jump off and then let you wrap it up.
Yeah, thanks, George. That was great. Believe it or not, that was George typing slower than normal. When we have our little hangout shares to figure stuff out, I get cross-eyed. But thanks, that was awesome, George. I know you put a lot of time into getting that thing together. So use ROPM. Test it out real hard. Let us know any issues you run into. I'm sure there's more. But like George said, like we want to start sharing and reusing code. We shouldn't be reinventing the wheel for every Roku project. We should be able to get a lot of really awesome packages out there to start making lives easier. So anyway, any final questions about anything?
Before we part ways, has anyone got any good ideas for any packages we should be making? Because I'm happy to start putting more packages out there. So if anyone's got any ideas of any packages that they think would be handy, I'm going to put out my flyweight code. I think that would be useful to just about anyone making a Roku app. And obviously I've got a full framework that I'm building or rebuilding. But is there anything else that we feel that we're doing over and over again or should be sharing that we're not? Because the chances are I probably would do it over the next couple of months if we think it would benefit the community.
Yeah, we can chat about those a little bit more offline too. Yeah, and if there are tools that you think would be helpful for the community, we're looking to kind of foster some of those on the Roku community organization on GitHub as well. So maybe it's something that you want to make or have exist, you want to help, but you want to work on it entirely yourself. Get in touch with us. We want to kind of spearhead a lot of this development. So, all right. It sounds like there are no questions, so I guess we can wrap up. Thanks everybody for attending, and we'll try to get this out on our YouTube channel as soon as we figure out where the heck to get all the audio and video pieces together. So, all right. Thanks everyone.